Welcome to User Insights, a podcast series powered by UXarmy.
Hi, Krutika. I welcome you to the User Insights podcast of UXarmy. Thanks a lot for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. I know that you have significant experience in user research in various domains, right from neurological domain, neurological studies, car driving and car sharing. And we would love to know more about you and also about the domains you have worked in. And later, the topic that we want to discuss today, and that topic is around how does collaboration work in user research. And since you are a practitioner from the industry, I'm sure you know a lot about it hands-on. So our audience would like to hear from you firsthand. But before anything, I think we would like to let you introduce yourself.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for welcoming me. I'm Krutika. I've been working as a UX researcher for over 6 years now. I started in the field of mental health. I started in Sweden trying to understand why doctors there are burnt out. And then mental health really interested me. So I moved into a startup that deals with brain mapping wearables. And then after around 3 years in mental health, I decided to move on and joined Uber Car Share as their first researcher. And there I was dealing with peer-to-peer car sharing. And now I work in the EdTech sector. So I've recently started working as a researcher at MathSpace. I think I'm really passionate about starting UX research teams from scratch, and especially working with smaller organizations and helping them build that research maturity from the start. I think that is why cross-functional collaboration is something that has always interested me. So I would love to share my thoughts. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for the introduction. And it's a very hot topic, and I think it's pretty good and relevant in today's world where researchers are actually choosing to do more than what they were actually doing in the beginning. If you see, user researchers are moving to market research. Market researchers are trying to do UX research from quite some time now. And then there is kind of merging of these two fields. But then there are other departments like software, there is hardware, especially when you're studying with some neuro-related studies, then maybe there are some EEG equipment involved and so on. So quite a number of departments, marketing, sales, and so on. So tell me your experience about how the cross-functional collaboration has worked for you.
Yeah. So I guess when you think of cross-functional collaboration, it's all about ensuring that research is not done in isolation, but rather with all the teams in your organization, both product and non-product. And the goal of this is to ensure that there is a collective ownership of the outcomes that come out of the research and that the research makes an impact the way you want it to. Like I said, I think a lot of my experience has been with joining companies as their first UX researcher and then working with the teams to build research from ground up. And I think that is what has led to me really relying on these cross-functional relationships to make research work. And I have worked with, I think, all the teams you can name in an organization for my research to have an impact, both product and non-product, like engineering, design, the decision makers within the product team, marketing, sales, customer support, operations. And I've seen the way they perceive research improve across the projects I've worked with. And that has been a very satisfying process for me. So it's really evident the way the research maturity in an organization improves as you start educating these different teams and start working with them to bring that collective ownership of the outcomes.
Yeah, interestingly, you mentioned that building research from ground up. I think this is probably one of the most challenging things that researchers face, because if something exists, then being a part of the flow is much easier. but being a part of getting something set up, one has to go through multiple hurdles, and multiple affiliations have to be formed to make things happen. So in that case, in your scenario, maybe highlights one incident which kind of sticks in your mind without mentioning the organization, of course.
Do you mean like with
when you were trying to establish these teams, and then you realize that, oh, there is this hurdle that I have to cross, and it's really becoming difficult for you to really cross that hurdle. Maybe there is something for the audience to learn from it.
Yeah.
And I know it's difficult at times to pull those kind of things,
Yeah.
but in case you can recall.
Yeah. So I think something that's really close to my heart and something that comes to mind when you ask me is when I was working in my initial days in an organization, I had to rely on multiple teams to even ensure that a research campaign is out. So we needed some quick results for a particular topic, and I had to release a survey, and I had to rely on another team to build that survey campaign because it had to go out through like the messaging operations, and it was the growth team that owned it. So like that was a bit of a challenge initially because I was new to the organization. I wasn't sure what that team's priority was, and I always have like trouble asking for help. I tend to try to do everything on my own, but across years I've realized that the right way to do is to go about asking for support because that's really necessary.
Yeah. There is a balance between collaboration and let's say the leadership. So you can always collaborate, or you can always go for a full-fledged leadership and say, hey, let me do it. But I think that's probably not the right way.
Right.
Although we are tempted from time to time to say, okay, if you are not doing it, let me do it. So what did you do to kind of overcome this?
Yeah. So at that point, I think I just told myself to chin up and ask for support. And then luckily the team was really nice and very understanding. So they did offer me support at that point. But then I realized that there needs to be processes in place because I'm going to be needing support more often. And like, I think that probably brings me to one of the biggest challenges one would encounter with cross-functional collaboration, which is conflicting priorities. So different teams like product engineering, marketing, and sales tend to have their own roadmaps and tend to set priorities independently. So that could mean that the research objectives of the project I'm currently working on wouldn't probably align with their immediate goals. And that would make them hesitate to take part in research activities or to contribute, or it might even lead to them overlooking insights that come out of it because they're not relevant to the work these teams are doing. So it becomes important to have to foster a culture where roadmaps complement each other, and it is the roadmaps of the different teams that drive the research roadmap. So I think the solution to this probably really varies from organization to organization. But in this particular case, I just went ahead and spent a lot of time with that team, understood their language, the metrics that are important to them and how they work. And I tried to work really closely with them to set up a process where I can request their support. And I started incorporating that into my timelines and my planning process as well. And there was even a time when I told them I would learn that software, and I went ahead and learned their marketing software so that I could build campaigns on my own.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that way, I think it's also interesting because it also helped me give something back to them, because there was a time when their team was really pressurized with with an influx of urgent projects, and I was able to step in and do a bit for them and just review some of their campaigns. So I think it's important for us to offer our support to other teams in any way we can, because while it's easy to just think none of this is my job, like I'm a researcher, I'm just going to focus on research, it's really important to have allies and strong relationships across teams, because you really need these teams to participate and to own the insights that come out of your research for it to have the impact you desire.
Yeah, so I think the point you mentioned is great. Like having allies across the teams and understanding their work properly, and also trying to help them, stepping up yourself, coming out of the role and then trying to help people do their work if you have the bandwidth. In addition to these three, what are the other thoughts that or takeaways you would like to have when somebody is trying to break into so-called territorial boundaries sometimes, if you will? How do you go about them? Did you face a situation, in fact, if you happen to see strong boundaries, how would you suggest to overcome? Maybe you have not faced those, but if someone faces those, what would be your advice?
Oh, no, I definitely have faced strong boundaries, and it can be really intimidating, especially if you're an introvert. And I think the thing I've realized, I guess, gained from my experience is to just be patient and to be consistent, because organizational understanding of research, or the maturity of research across teams is not going to change overnight or with just one project. It takes time. So I've been really consistent with regards to educating stakeholders and drip feeding insights and observations, and explaining my methodologies over and over again. And I've seen that gradual growth and understanding of how research works and why it's important. And the other thing is, you can really try to understand what is important to these teams, and help them feel that it's UX research is not just the only tool that brings user voice to the forefront. It is the entire organization's responsibility to ensure that decisions are user-centric and driven by insights. So as a researcher, you're just a catalyst or an amplifier of the user voice, and every team other than the research team operate as cross-functional partners whose participation is really necessary. So while it is easy to say this in a verbal sense, it also becomes important to understand the language these teams speak, the metrics they track, their ways of working, and then try to tailor your research documentation to provide insights that are relevant to the work these teams are doing.
So if you can think of, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you can think of an example that pull out an example where you convince the team members of another team to show that they are researcher is a catalyst, but maybe you are the leader in bringing insights to the business or inside the organization. But how do you convince somebody who is not on board yet to cross that mindset that, you are the researcher, I am so and so, I am not researcher. So if you can pull out some example from your previous experience.
I would probably say it's probably been challenging for me with working with marketing teams and sales teams in the past, because the languages we speak sound similar, but the kind of information derived from these languages can be quite different. Like quantitative research probably happens in both marketing teams as well as UX research teams, but the results that come out of them and the actions they drive can be really different. And I think the thing that has helped for me is to just keep having conversations with these people and try to not just have a professional relationship, but also get to know them on a personal level as well, because I think I'm somebody who gets intimidated quite easily, and it has helped see somebody as a friend rather than a colleague while trying to convince them serious matters such as research. So it helps to form that friendly relationship with these people, and have continuous, set up routine meetings. So what I've done in the past is, when I had to convince a particular team about how the research insights would be valuable to them, I just set up a routine meeting. I would set up a meeting for every month where I would just keep them as audience and just walk them through the different things that came out of. So I'd set up some continuous discovery processes where feedback would keep coming in through a voice of customer tool and through online reviews and through customer support tickets. So I would just show those trends from those feedback, and I would just keep them as audience and just walk them through it every month. And then, like, after a couple of meetings, I started seeing that they started asking questions like, okay, but why is that trend not changing?
Yeah. It takes time to open up, and I think it takes time to also for people to see any other colleague as not as threat, but as a partner in crime, if I can put it in a
Exactly.
negative way.
And also, like, it also helps to utilize the data they are already like
Yeah.
tracking, because there's data everywhere. Every team collects data, and a lot of this can be really valuable in strengthening the qualitative insights you form. And I found it really helpful to like use supporting data, like customer support volume, ticket volumes, or even sales email conversions, and even help center article views to strengthen some of my findings. And when that happens, when you align your research findings with the metrics and language these teams already use, then they start seeing the impact of it better, and there's a better acceptance.
In my experience also, and I these are great points, and for me also it has been similar. Like for me, researcher is also a problem finder. So if you they are always looking for problems to solve and find out why those are appearing in the first place. So sometimes going into other person's domain and figuring out what are the insights they are getting, and if, for example, if NPS is low, why the NPS is low is already a big problem statement.
Yeah.
Because the other department might be measuring the NPS, and that would be their KPI, but your KPI would be to know how can you improve the NPS, or what causes the NPS to be low. So I'm not sure how you handled the assignments that were not given to you, but you took it because of this cross-functional collaboration, and you figured out things. And I think that is something I would like to have a sense of, like what percentage of the pie is something that you would have done as such problem definition on your own because of the collaboration, versus problem definition given by the organization to you. If you think as a percentage, as a pie chart.
I think the pie chart changes based on how long you've been working at a certain organization and what kind of initiatives you've been taking to ensure that this collaboration keeps happening. I think.
And why this changes, and what's the reason?
Yeah, because over time, as you start pushing towards a culture where the research roadmap is a product of the roadmap of the other teams, then it becomes easier to plan your research in a way that you can provide timely insights that complement the decision-making timelines of these teams. So I think, to give you an example of this, like I remember at the later part of, like, I think a couple of years into I joined a particular organization, we were at a point where we used to actually have meetings with both product and non-product stakeholders. And together we would decide the priorities for UX research. So there'd be requests. So like there was a way for people to like send in requests and share their roadmaps in advance. And the research team could have a go at seeing, okay, I think I can make a dent here with research, or we already have information for this. So then we came up with a bunch of research topics that would help all of these different teams. And then we all sat together and decided what the roadmap was going to look like for that particular quarter. And in that case, I think it's safe to say that most of the problems we end up finding are on the basis of what the organization really does want us to find. And there, I think the pie chart would be the majority of it would be like requested by the organization as opposed.
That's just a great point, because if you ask a research manager to define problems for you, then in my opinion, a researcher is bringing the problem from their table to the manager's table, which is not a leadership activity, I would say. So what you did is essentially, in my opinion, a very good thing to do, which means bring the people together, figure out what problems they are facing. And I'm just repeating your words, essentially bringing all the problems together, identifying which ones to solve, and then agreeing with your manager or someone who takes the decisions of what should be the research log or research backlog. So I hope I described
the thing.
You
nailed it.
Yeah. So thankfully, was not much lost in translation. Moving on to another topic, which is pretty interesting, is about things that happen putting in a funny way. I have worked in organizations where I have seen meetings when you are deploying the research. Most of the people are busy on their laptops, frantically typing on that. And that's the usual thing because everybody is busy. They are hard pressed for their own deliverables and so on. So when you go present the insights, what are your top 3 tips to be able to make the presentation effective? Because people from different functions are sitting there. They don't have as much interest probably in your insights and the findings unless something's really dangerous. So how do you actually make an environment where people start to take notice and not just keep typing on the keyboard or think something else?
Yeah, I think I like to think of it twofold. One as a long-term strategy and one as a project level approach. And you think of the success of UX research long-term. Like I mentioned before, it's really a result of a culture where there is a joint ownership of research objectives, and that happens when the research roadmap is formed, like by bringing together all these people, like we discussed earlier. And when that happens, when there is this shared ownership of research objectives, there is a stronger commitment towards the research outcomes. So naturally, people are more engaged when the research outcomes come out because they all have a stake in those outcomes. They have all jointly led to the formation of this research project. So for long-term success, this kind of culture is really crucial. But if you think of it, on a project level, I found it really helpful to not wait until the end of the research to share the findings. I found it really helpful to drip feed insights and observations along the research and taking the stakeholders with you along the research journey. And I love doing this because it helps stakeholders get familiarized with what the users are saying and understand.
I want to interrupt there because that's a very interesting point. How do you do that? I mean, how do you keep? You said drip feeding that's very nice word. Drip feeding. It literally sounds like a glucose bottle where you are putting drip by drip items into the body. That's how I picture it. But that could be a funny interpretation. I just want to know, like, how do you drip feed this information? In what form and nuggets? Is it nuggets of information sent over email? What's the format looking like? And that's something quite exciting that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think it varies from organization to organization, obviously. But what I found really helpful is to be really informal about it. And I think people tend to get intimidated by formal documents and formal pieces of information. Yeah. And I love being playful with my information. So I share very brief post-interview summaries after every single interview on Slack, which is our communication channel. And I encourage people to voice their thoughts and questions within the same thread. And then I actually get back to them. Like I incorporate them in my upcoming sessions wherever I can. And I get back to the same thread with like additional comments on that.
That's a great way. And are these like just text fields, or do you make some slides?
No slides. I'm very informal when it comes to that. It's just pure text.
I think sometimes it takes away the burden from people to open the slides, read them. So in a way, a free-flowing text sometimes, and that's why Notion exists or started to exist in the first place. So sometimes people informally quickly look at things, and then they are probably able to respond to it. So it's a great way to do it. And I interrupted you, so please continue if you still have that thought.
I think I do. So yeah, I share it on Slack. I use lots of emojis to make, to catch people's attention and make them want to like read this message. I use bold text wherever relevant, but it's always short. Like it's very bite-sized, so people don't have to spend a lot of time reading it. I maintain a feedback doc for every project, which is always updated with the latest feedback. So everything I share on Slack, a more detailed version of it would be available in the doc. So if something catches people's attention, they can just go into the doc and read about it in detail. And I share highlight reels from interviews, like 2-minute, 3-minute videos in Slack wherever I can. And that takes away the need for people to have to attend sessions to get the content.
Sounds like you're a video editor also, because you can make reels out of it.
AI
Is it a tool, or did you use any tool, or
No,
was it more like
I use Dovetail as my research repository, and Dovetail makes it really
I
simple.
see. I see. So you make clips out of it and then you
I share
share
it. Yeah,
those
I share the
Wow.
clips as well. So it's really informal. And then the I think the good part about this is it makes context setting really easy. So people are
Right.
allowed to understand the context at a very relaxed momentum. There's no information overload. And by the time the research is over, people already have a good understanding of what users are saying. And it's important to really set clear definitions between observations and insights at this point. So I make sure that every time I share this, I stress that this is just an observation, if it's an observation,
Okay.
and not an insight that needs to be interpreted or actioned. And by the time I share the insights, I think the question was, how do you maintain people's attention during a presentation?
Yeah.
By the time I share the insights, people already have a good sense of what's happening, and the insights make sense to them. So that makes it easy for me to keep my presentation really short. And
Yes.
and then we use the rest of the time to drive meaningful conversation around what we can do next with these insights.
Great approach. And when you share, I've seen also that a tendency, and probably it's just a way I look at things, and I've seen that often people also, when you send something over, people just react to it with a heart or whatever, and sometimes they don't mean it. So how do you differentiate? And this is really a deep question. How do you differentiate between those, let's say, the reaction with I have seen it kind of reaction, and maybe kind of excitement, a made up excitement, rather than real excitement.
Yeah.
So how do you ensure? Do you do some checks or tests, smart tests to check whether they really are reading it, or it's just they are just reacting on every of your insight that you send over on Slack, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it also goes back to the way we would track research impact. And when I think of research impact, I think of both passive and active. And I think right now I'll just focus on passive. And passive is, the indirect influence the research has on your team. And I think if you actively look at passive impact, you will get a knack where you can see the actual reach of the project. You wouldn't really have to rely on people's reactions to understand how the research has impacted that particular team. And I think it's not often quantifiable, but it's a qualitative impact, and you can track this by looking at the reach of the project. And something that's a favorite thing of mine is to see how often it's been mentioned or referenced across other channels. So I keep a track of, and I also rely on my allies from my other teams to let me know if my research has been referenced somewhere or mentioned in one of their meetings or in one of their docs or slides. And I always make note of that. And I always think that's a good passive impact to track. So I think across time...
It's your oxygen, that when you see something from your research mentioned in other presentations, then you are like, wow.
Dopamine rush.
I breathe nice oxygen.
Exactly. And I think to also add on to that, I try... So like I mentioned before, I love keeping things informal, especially when it comes to research, because I think when data is too formal, there are people who might get intimidated and overwhelmed. So I try to stay away from setting up a 1-hour block for presenting my research, because it has, I have experienced in the past that only half the people I've invited come, and they probably don't have the context. And it's just, an information overload. So what I love to do is sneak into their meetings, their regular meetings. So
that's smart.
I sneak into engineering stand-ups and product stand-ups and squad stand-ups, and I request for 10 minutes of their time every other day. And I use 10 minutes to share one bite-sized insight or observation that came out of that particular project I'm working on. And it takes just a couple of minutes for me to share that. And then we use the rest of the 10 minutes to discuss for, the other teammates to discuss questions that come to their mind and allows their voices to be heard. And
also a very helpful way of reaching out. I mean, this is basically the time when people are more receptive to listening, like you mentioned, and not in a formal setting where people are specifically coming to hear 1 hour of lecture, which is a research report. So that's a great way of actually getting into people's mind and get the insight right there where it matters, because that's where the product is being built.
Exactly.
So I think it's a great thought and a great approach. And where you mentioned the point comes back on the introvert versus extrovert. So it takes a bit of courage to be able to break the mental boundaries and a bit of witty mindset and also mindset which is required to get the insights, because end of the day you are trying to help someone.
Yeah.
I know you had more to say. I just want to ask you one more thing. But if that thought is burning in your mind, please feel free to express that. Or shall I proceed to
go
the
ahead.
next? Okay. So the other question I had was that when you quantify that, like often we are asked to quantify, right? Because research is something without which products are made or can be made, have been made in 90s or early 2000s. There were situations where products were made without a proper user research or even a user research. How do you measure the success for your research? What do you measure as metrics and present back at the end of the year or end of a quarter or 6 months to everybody across the organization, saying that, hey, this is what research has achieved? Did you practice that? First of all, if you didn't, then it's fine. But if you did, I think the audience would be very interested to know that.
Yeah, I did practice it. And I think the way we got to where we are at right now with regards to like having an impact tracking process was really iterative. So when I started working at that particular organization, it was just I started with just a 1-question survey. How did you find the research on a scale of 1 to 5? And I would get my stakeholders to fill it out. And I think the problem with that was there were some stakeholders who were too nice to give me a low score, because they obviously know I'm the only researcher and they probably worry about whether I would take it personally. So I could feel that it wasn't giving me accurate results as to what the impact of the research was. So then, we started iterating on this approach, and then I started getting more people on the research team, and we did a lot of, vision setting and strategy setting for the UX research team. And then we came out with a couple of KPIs that we really wanted to measure for the success of our team. And a few of them were quantifiable, a few of them were not. I think the passive impact that I was talking about earlier, we would still track it, but that was not quantifiable. That would just be as examples for us to see, okay, like this research seems to have made a large impact in terms of people wanting to know more about it. And we'll see what references or what lessons we can learn from that project in future projects.
Some quantifiable metrics that come to your mind just for the sake of for me.
Apart from passive impact, we also track active impact, which is both immediate and long term, and that was what was the quantifiable part of measuring impact. So with active impact, I would say for the immediate impact, we would track metrics like ease, timeliness, and with ease, it's both like ease of understanding the insights as well as ease of sharing the insights. So we had a survey for stakeholders to fill out when the research was over, and these were the questions the survey had. So how was their experience in understanding and digesting the insights? How was their experience in being able to share the insights? And all of that would be on a scale of 1 to 5. And then there was timeliness. Whether the insights were delivered in time for the decisions to be taken. And if not, we would look at what factors caused that to happen. There could be both factors within the control of the research team as well as outside of control.
I didn't think of that as a measure, like internal measure, that's really something that I have not thought of it. Like you getting rated, or maybe getting a feedback. It's a feedback loop that you create within the organizations
Ex-
to get different how people perceive research. How about the measuring the research impact um, of your research
Yeah,
itself outside, like whatever, based on the insights that you bring out from outside to the
right.
organization, and then measuring the impact of that yourself and saying, okay, these are the top three metrics that I think have
Yeah.
changed or have helped the organization because of this. From your point of
Yeah.
view, what were those?
So that was the long-term impact we would track. And
I
it
see.
often can be tracked only a couple of months after the research has been shared. So
Yeah.
we also had a second survey that would go out 6 months after the research had been shared. And we had a list of the top business metrics that the entire organization was working on, like onboarding, conversions, sign-ups. And then
Yeah.
like there are specific metrics that are like special to the OKRs of that particular year that would also be there in that drop down, like support ticket volumes. There were times when we
It's
wanted to bring down the support rates for that particular point in the user journey. So we would see 6 months after the research had been shared what metrics, what decisions that came out of the research findings have made a dent in these important business metrics. So
I see.
having that kind of of an overall lens, and having two different surveys, and also having a survey for us UX researchers to fill out, which was the passive impact. We actually had a
Yeah.
total of 3 surveys that would help us track overall research impact of a particular project. And
I see.
like the passive impact one that us researchers would fill out based on what we have been seeing, and then like the
Yep.
immediate impact, which is ease, timeliness, and then the business impact, which happens 6 months after the
Great.
project.
Great. Great speaking with you. And I think these were really, really very useful insights that the team has received. And also we will distribute it in the community for other researchers to follow and learn from it. And I think it's very, very, very valuable. So I just want to end this session with a thought that whatever you have done in your experience is great, and I think I really appreciate the kind of innovative ideas that you have applied in your work. They are very genuine. That's what I feel, and they are very they are very practical as such. So they are easy to apply for our new researchers if they are listening to this podcast. I think they will be really learning from this. And moving forward, I think there are lots of hurdles to be crossed. I always talk of hurdles much more than achievements, because hurdles are those which take you forward. Because even if you fall forward. So that's where I think hurdles are a bigger teacher in my view, and bigger, I would say, promoters of your skill set, or my skill set, I would say. Uh,
Yeah,
then probably the successes, because successes must be celebrated, but there's always good to see the hurdles and how to figure out an action plan to overcome them. So great, Krutika. Thanks a lot for your time. We really appreciate from UXarmy that you've spent this time. And then we hope we can engage again in some form. And feel free to use the platform that we have. Give us feedback. We have big ears to listen to things, and we always are improving. But some insights that I have gotten today will be definitely used in a positive sense to make not just our product better, but even the researchers at UXarmy can probably learn some things from you.
I'm really
So thanks again. And then I wish you a very nice day ahead. And we are almost midweek over, so I can't say happy weekend, but I can just say have a nice evening and afternoon for you. So take good care, and let's catch up some other
of
time.
course. Thank you so much. This is
Thanks a lot.
see you.
Pleasure. See you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of User Insights. We hope you gained valuable insights from our conversation.